Hi folks, I'm Owl, this is Yarn Owl Reads, and this is going to be a video talking about my reading survey, like comparing the first half of the year to the last half of the year, and then talking about some full year things. I don't know, I just took a bunch of questions from a bunch of different reading tags, so the reading survey, which I found on Books and Lala on Kayla's channel. I took questions from the mid-year tag update and from the end of the year tag, and I just squished them all together, and that's going to be this video. So first of all, number of books read. I read 95 books the first half of the year, 104 books in the second half of the year, and 199 books in the year as a whole. My most read genre, excuse me. My most read genre, first half of the year it was romance with 29 books, and the second half of the year it was either romance with 25 books or spec fic with 25 books also. And then for the full year it was romance with 54 books. These are going to be the only number things. If you want to hear about the rest of my reading stats, there is either a video up about that now or there will be soon, so you can go check that out. Alright, my favorite book of the first half of the year, my favorite book was A Duke by Default by Alyssa Cole. I don't know why that was so hard to say all of a sudden. I loved A Duke by Default. I love Portia, who is the main character of this book, with everything I have in me. And just, yes. My favorite book of the second half of the year was To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This was a very end of the year. I think I read it in December. I love Becky Chambers. I love everything I've read of her so far. I still haven't caught up on the Wayfarer series. I don't know why I'm putting off Record of a Spaceborne Few. I know I'm gonna love it. I'm just... whatever. Haven't read it yet. But To Be Taught If Fortunate was just the best piece of scientific fiction I have ever read. I'm gonna drink some water so that I can stop croaking about it and talk about it. As a youth and adolescent, and through my first degree, through my bachelor's, I was planning to be a scientist. That was my plan. I have my bachelor's in biology. And all my friends are scientists, and my wife is a scientist. And so there are serious moral quandaries that you have as a scientist. And, there's a lot of people who don't do it right. There are many shitty scientists. Whether they're shitty because they're taking advantage of unpaid labor, whether they're shitty because they have very little compunction about their experiments, whether they're shitty because they keep an octopus in a tiny tank for months on end. Which, to be fair, sometimes octopus needs to be in small tanks, sometimes octopus is being rehabilitated, sometimes it is an experiment and the octopus will be let go after, and sometimes it is an experiment that will help octopodes everywhere, hopefully, with the knowledge we gain. But this novella, sorry, I got way off track, this novella gets into that, and it is the best discussion of ethics in science that I've ever read. And I love it. And before arguing with scientists, I feel like everybody else should go read it too. Anyway, and then for my favorites of the year, I'm not gonna get into that. I'm gonna have a whole separate video talking about, I think I talk about my top 20 favorites. Oh, let's look. How many did I number? I think there were 35 on my favorites page, and I narrowed it down to Oh, I did that. I did the thing. It's gonna be my 19 favorite books from 2019. Okay, I respect that. Anyway, that's gonna be a different video. Uh, okay, so my least favorite book from the first half of the year, uh, is a tie, and they're both books I read for a book club, and so it's either Red Mars by Stanley. This is why I write all of this down. Oh, by Kim Stanley Robinson, which is a classic sci-fi, and it's not bad. I wouldn't say it's good, but it's not bad, and some things it does well, and I don't want to talk about it very much, so dropping things. And then it's tied with, unfortunately, The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin, which it didn't work for me. And that's fine. It doesn't work for some people. Just whatever, moving past it. My least favorite book of the second half of the year was The Silent Patient by Alex... What's your last name, Alex? Oh, geez. Okay. By Alex Michaelides. I'm sorry. Anyway, my problem with The Silent Patient is that I liked the writing. Like, the writing was good. I could not forgive it for the portrayal of mental health and the demonization of mental health. And then on top of that, there's some other, like, uncomfortable things, like fat shaming, and, like, it just... Despite the fact that I enjoyed the writing and actually enjoyed the process of reading this book at times, it's just, there were too many things that it did too wrong with representation. So, there's that. I'm not going to pick any of those for least favorite of the year. Never mind, yes I am, it was The Silent Patient. I'm sorry, it didn't work for me. Okay, for most disappointing, for the first half of the year, unfortunately, this was Kingdom of Needle and Bone by Mira Grant. This is one of her novellas. For the most part, I love her novellas. I love pretty much anything Mira Grant / Sean Maguire writes. She is very good at writing, and her style really, really works for me. And I loved Kingdom of Needle and Bone until the last freaking page. Okay, so I can't tell you why I didn't like it, because spoilers. I can say... No, I can't. That is also a spoiler. Oh my god. Okay, it is about... it's essentially about immunization, vaccinations, and a possible future in which there's no longer herd immunity, and epidemics happen. And I liked it until the end, and then I think it undid everything it did before that. And it, to me, is the opposite of To Be Taught If Fortunate. To Be Taught If Fortunate is one of the best pieces of, like, it's one of the best representations of science in fiction, and to me, this is one of the worst representations of science in fiction. So, for the second half of the year, my biggest disappointment was Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. And this is nobody's fault. And a lot of people didn't like this book. It just didn't work for some people. The problem to me wasn't the problem a lot of other people seemed to have, which was that A lot of people seemed to think that the like love interest of this was too macho, which like he was, but that didn't bug me, or that the uh, main character was like childish, which totally disagree, but you do you. Um, and they didn't like that he calls her baby girl a lot, which is actually a thing that I really like. So that didn't bug me. My problem was that it was really, 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 really allo cishet. And there were a lot of assumptions in it that were allo cishet normative. And lots of like describing one's genitals as one's womanhood or manhood. And like, I just, yeah, a lot of attaching gender to body parts and a lot of assuming you are this gender, therefore you're attracted to that gender, and there are only two, and anyway, none of that was like really explicit. This book isn't even a little bit about that, but it was just really pervasive, and it was just like, it sort of felt like a book of microaggressions against queer folk. And that's not what it was. That's just how I read it. It wasn't a horrible book, and if you're in for a cute romance and don't mind all of the other things I mentioned, you should definitely read it. But I think I'm pretty done with Tessa Bailey, and definitely done with that series. Okay, most disappointing. Okay, we did most disappointing. Most overhyped. And then after this, I think I am done with the negative ones, and I get into the positive ones. Most overhyped in the first half of the year for me, don't come at me, was Two Night Owl from Dogfish. And I have a very, very specific reason why I think this is overhyped. Specifically, I think the audiobook is overhyped because the story is told through emails, and many of these emails are being written by like 11, 12-year-olds, and they don't delete any of the re's at the beginning of like at the subject of the email. And the email server that they're using adds another re every time they continue an email thread. And the narrator read every single re. At one point, I think there were like 54 in a row. And I could not handle, like, I finished listening to it, but my goodness, I hated that book by the end, just because of that. So anyway, that's a personal thing, but I don't recommend the audiobook for that. If you're gonna read it, I definitely recommend reading it with your eyes. And for the second half of the year, for me, okay, so this isn't necessarily overhyped from this last year. It's that I finally read a Stephen King book, and he is very hyped. I would go so far as to say possibly overhyped. I read A Good Marriage by Stephen King, and I know he works for some people. More power to you. It was my first Stephen King, and it didn't really work for me. Like, the writing was good. I liked the writing. Didn't like the way he did the, like, story as much. And yeah, I did. His characterization of women is just not great. Like, the main character, the only narrator for A Good Marriage, is a woman. And it was just not great. It very much felt to me like a woman being written by a man. And I didn't like it. I might read more Stephen King in the future, but probably not. No. Okay. So getting into my most surprising book of the year, for the first half of the year, and I talk about this one in my, I talked about this in my mid-year freak out book tag, I think is what that was called. But my most surprising book for the first half of the year was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, because, and I talk about this a lot more in that video, but I read it and it was fine. I thought it was fine. I gave it like 4 stars. It was good. I enjoyed it. I didn't really have anything bad to say about it, but it wasn't like life changing. And then I read it again, and it was. And it became one of my favorite books of all time. I have now read it 5 times, I think. So, just, it's a good one, and I recommend it a lot, and it was a really pleasant surprise. So, for the second half of the year, my biggest surprise was To Be Taught If Fortunate. I don't know why that was necessarily a surprise. I don't know why I go into Becky Chambers books with such with low expectations. Because I've 5-starred every single thing of hers that I've read. But I'm so hesitant to pick up her new stuff, and I don't know why. For To Be Taught If Fortunate, it was partially because it was not in the Wayfarer series, and it was the first thing I was reading of hers that wasn't in the Wayfarer series. And it was a novella, and, like, I wasn't super into the concept. Like, I told myself all of these things. And then oh my gosh, guys, it's stunning. Like, super recommend. You should definitely read To Be Taught If Fortunate. For most underhyped, for the first half of the year, that was The Afterword by E.K. Johnston. I don't really hear people talk about this. I didn't really hear many people talk about this. I got an arc of this from ALA Midwinter, and I loved it. It's so good. It's told in 2 timelines. One of them is about a group of heroes, like on a quest, on a quintessential quest. And they're all women, and a lot of them are women of color, and like there are women of color on the cover with armor, and it just, oh God, guys, it's so good. It's so good. And then it's queer, and it's queer. So the first half is all of these women going on this grand mission adventure. And it's not the first half, the timelines are interspersed throughout. But the second timeline is after all of that, and like living as people in this kingdom, or queendom, or country, after they have gone on this huge adventure, and like they are heroes, and it's just, and it's so queer. It's so lovely. And I don't even talk about it enough. I don't even gush about it as much as I think I should, because it's so good. So anyway, y'all should go read The Afterword by E.K. Johnston. My most underhyped book for the second half of the year is All the Bad Apples by Moira Fowley Doyle. Moira Fowley Doyle. There we go. And not that this is actually necessarily that underhyped, I just want more people to be talking about it because I loved it so much. I have read 2 books by Moira Fowley Doyle at this point, and I loved, like, they were both, well, that's not true. I was gonna say they were both surprises for me, but I actually went into All the Bad Apples with pretty high expectations because of how much I loved Spellbook of the Lost and Found. And it's queer, and it's lovely, and I just want everyone to read it. Sorry, I should tell you what it's about. It's a book in which there's this family, and the girls in the family who don't like fit into the cookie cutter shape of what's expected of them are cursed. So that includes if you are pregnant out of wedlock, if you're queer, if you just don't like being the cookie cutter. And so it's told mostly in modern day about a girl who, like, she is in this family, and she, one, thinks her sister is not dead, and everybody else thinks she is. And so she's out to prove that her sister's not dead. And then also she wants to learn more about the curse and break the curse. And so in doing that, she's reading letters that are possibly from her sister. Uh, and it tells like the history of their family. And so even though it is all technically told in present day, these letters are long and are like so beautifully rendered, so detailed, that I would say that it's sort of a different, it's just told in two timelines. So it's really good, and y'all should read it. So let's see, the longest book I read in the first half of the year was Symbiont. I should know how to say this. By Mira Grant, which was 608 pages. For the second half of the year, it was Over and Over Again by Cole McCade, and that was 596 pages. So my longest book in the whole year was Symbiont. The shortest book for the first half of the year was The Good Listener. I don't remember who that's by. For the second half of the year, it was Emergency Skin by, I think, N.K. Jemisin. I should just look both of these up. Okay. There we go. Yeah. Emergency Skin is by N.K. Jemisin, and that was 33 pages. And A Good Listener is by... There we go. Apparently I read my longest and shortest book in the same month. They were both in April. So The Good Listener by Delilah Fisher was 22 pages. So that makes it my shortest book of the year, as well as my shortest book of the first half of 2019. My biggest accomplishment. So I actually have a lot of accomplishments, and I'm gonna go through a bunch of them, because I can, even though this video is already 23 minutes of raw footage. So in the first half of the year, in March, in fact, it was just in the 1 month of March, I read the entire Alpha and Omega series by Patricia Briggs. I think there are 5 of them at this point. Excuse me. There's 6 of them. There's 5 in a novella. Okay. And so, anyway, I read the novella and then all 5 novels in the series all in March, and I was really proud of myself. I didn't mean to, like, I didn't set out with that as the goal. I was just very feeling Patricia Briggs, and I had never, like, caught up on that series. I had only read the first 2 or 3. So I read it all, and I really liked it. It was really fun. I also read Criminal Intentions, episodes 1 through 7 in the first half of the year, which I am proud of because these books don't have audiobooks. They are only visual reads, and I read all the first 7, all with my eyeballs. And so I didn't finish the season. Season 1 has, I think, 13 episodes. And I'm gonna get there eventually, but like just the fact that I read that many, I am very proud of. And then in the second half of the year, I finished Over and Over Again, which, 1, was the longest book I read in the second half of the year. That was 596 pages. 2, there's no audiobook. I read it with my eyeballs. I am really proud of the fact that I read an almost 600 page book with my eyeballs. In the second half of the year, I also decided I was going to reread the entire Mercyverse. So, Patricia Briggs has several different series. 2 of them are the Alpha and Omega series and the Mercy Thompson series. And they're set in the same universe, and I had never, like, read them through in the suggested order. And then I had never read the short stories that she has released, like, to accompany them. And the next Mercy book is coming out in March, and I decided that I was going to reread everything in the Mercyverse in like chronological as of the happening of in the story order. Between, I started the last week of November, I think? No, last week of October. No, was it the last week of November? Seriously? No, okay, it was the first week of November. Okay, that makes better sense. Anyway, I started in the first week of November, and I got through, like, to this point, which was by the end of the year, because I haven't really read any of them in 2020 so far. This is my Mercyverse reread schedule, in case anyone is curious. But I got through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 short stories, 1 graphic novel, and 11 novels. All in this universe series between the beginning of November and the last one I read was at the end of December. So, yeah, I'm impressed. When I'm done, I'm going to film a whole video or do a whole blog post. I'm going to do something talking about the Mercyverse. Because there are some things that I really enjoy about it. But damn, there are some things it does wrong. Especially in the short stories. I have a lot to say about the short stories. So that's going to be a video for a later time. I still have... Oh no, I'm behind. I read that story. So I still have 2 short stories to go, one of which is not in the collection of short stories, so I might not end up reading it. And so 1 short story, 1 graphic novel, and 6 novels, including Smoke Bitten, which comes out in March. Yeah. So I have, until middle of March to do all of that. I am not even a little bit worried about getting all of that done in time. I tend to binge, so honestly I'll probably listen to most of the rest of them in a month. Anyway, yeah. That'll be an interesting video to film. Okay, so next, my favorite characters of the first half of the year. My favorite character was Portia from A Duke by Default. Talked about that a bit already. Talked about that in my mid-year freakout tag. In the second half of the year, my favorite characters were Aubrey Rose and Thomas from the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. I read these because of Destiny, who is at Howling Libraries. You should go follow her on all of her different things. And I just, I went in with low expectations. And I was really, really happy. I loved the characters so much. I love Aubrey Rose. I really loved Thomas, who was her love interest. It did not do what I thought it was gonna do. I thought that she was gonna... that's a spoiler, though. Anyway, if you want to talk about it with me, feel free to find me in DMs or in the comments or whatever. But it did a lot of really lovely things, and it did some things I wasn't super happy with, but throughout all of it, I really liked the characters, and they made sense to me, so that was fun. Let's see. A book that made you cry. For the first half of the year, that was A Heart and a Body in the World by Deb Coletti. Again, that was in my mid-year freakout tag. For the second half of the year, that was A Man Called Ove A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Bachman. Because I had a lot of grandparent feels last year. I still do. My grandmother passed away at the very beginning of 2019. And so, yeah, A Man Called Uwe just gave me a lot of grandparent feels, and I cried a lot. A book that made you laugh. For the first half of the year, I definitely have to say The Disasters by M.K. England. Again, I talked about that in my mid-year freakout tag. For the second half of the year, I don't really have a book that made me laugh. I didn't really read much funny stuff, which is sad. But a series that made me very happy was Criminal Intentions. And especially by the time I got to episode 7, like I said, and episode 7 and I think 6 are just really, really adorable and cute and wonderful, and they just made me really, really happy. Plus, I read these over my honeymoon. My wife and I, for our 1-year anniversary / honeymoon, rented a isolated cabin. Secluded is a much better word there. Isolated is more horror movie. I'm not actually sure Secluded is better. Whatever. We rented a cabin. We survived. And we just did a lot of cuddling and reading. And so, yeah. Criminal Intentions is lovely. New favorite author for the first half of the year, that was Talia Hibbert and Cole McCade. Talk about that in my mid-year wrap-up tag. Mid-year freakout tag. For the second half of the year, it was Cat Sebastian. And she is probably considered problematic in the romance community because she writes a lot of male and you know, as far as I know, she's a straight cis woman, but I don't actually know that. I have done no looking into her at all. Anyway, I started with, she had a FF book come out, or an FF novella come out last year. And it was her first FF, and it was like, yes, I want more queer ladies in my life, I'm gonna read it. And I loved it. And there were references, so it's a novella set in her Turner series. And there were references, and it's just like, I want to know more about these characters. So I read the first book in her Turner series, and I loved it. And it was just like cute and fluffy and made me so happy. And then I switched over to her other series, which is my favorite of her series, and that was Seducing the Sedgwicks. And like, it did so many things that made me happy, and I loved it, and it made me feel really good and made me very happy. So she became a new favorite author for me. And then, best sequel. Okay, for the first half of the year, A Duke by Default, nobody is surprised. For the second half of the year, I have to say A Gentleman Never Keeps Score by Cat Sebastian. This is the second Seducing the Sedgwicks book. Seducing the Sedgwicks? How do I say that? It's her second Seducing the Sedgwicks book. And I thought her first book was, like, the first book in that series was gonna be my favorite. And then I read the second book, it's so good. It's just so good. It's a discussion of recovery, and of being a survivor of sexual abuse, but it was still like a beautiful romance book, and that just made me very happy. It was also a bit of a discussion about racism and homophobia in whatever era these are taking place in. The main character is this Sedgwick dude, and his love interest is a black tavern owner, bar owner, pub owner. Yeah. He owns a drinking and eating establishment, and it was just, it made me very, very happy. So next, there's beautiful book. For the first half of the year, I think the most beautiful book I read was Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. This year, I think the most beautiful book I'm going to read is going to be Sword in the Stars by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. Oh my, these are beautiful books. Second half of the year, I read Aisha at Last, I read Work for It, I read An Unkindness of Ghosts. All of these had absolutely stunning covers. And finally, my best reread. For the first half of the year, that was the Alpha and Omega series. That was just really fun, and I had a really good time and enjoyed it. For the second half of the year, I read Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. It's the second in the Murderbot books. The Murderbot Diaries. And I loved it. I just, the first time I read through the Murderbot series was I listen to all the audiobooks, as I do, but I've slowly been buying the ebooks. And this year I read All Systems Red, which is the first one, and Artificial Condition, both from my Kindle, and it was just a really nice and enjoyable experience, and I love Murderbot, and I cannot wait for Network Effect. Okay, I've also got some weirdly specific favorites, but this video is almost 40 minutes at this point, so no. I'm gonna do a different video for that. Anyway, that's it. That's what I have for you. Feel free to drop things in the comments below, like, you know, words or questions. All the information you need should be in the description below. And yeah, if y'all stuck out this video, well freaking done. Other than that, talk to y'all soon. Bye.